Lumber just became the latest proof that Canada is no longer waiting for anyone, especially not Washington. With a sweeping new strategy, Ottawa has turned a long-standing vulnerability into a national advantage, positioning Canada's lumber sector for a level of independence and global reach it has never enjoyed before.
As of this afternoon, there is more money coming to help maritime softwood lumber companies and workers struggling with the impact of those U.S. tariffs. The Prime Minister announced a relief package about an hour or so ago. This is something that a lot of people in New Brunswick have been watching for.
We will also provide an additional $500 million to the Business Development Bank of Canada's Softwood Lumber Guarantee Program to ensure that companies have the financing and the credit support that they need to maintain and restructure their operations during this period of transformation.
Prime Minister Mark Carney stepped in front of cameras this week and delivered something Canada's forestry regions have been waiting years to hear: a decisive, well-funded, long-term plan to strengthen the lumber industry at home and expand its reach abroad. For decades, lumber has been one of Canada's most important exports, supporting thousands of families in British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes. Yet, despite its importance, the sector has spent too many years reacting to decisions made outside Canada's borders, especially decisions coming from the United States. Carney changed that direction in one afternoon. He announced major support that does more than patch over short-term challenges. It signals a national pivot. His plan subsidizes the movement of lumber across the country so producers can reach new markets without relying on traditional U.S. routes. It strengthens financing for mills large and small, ensuring companies have the credit they need to modernize, automate, and prepare for global competition. It streamlines federal programs so businesses no longer waste time navigating scattered funding channels. And it launches a sector-wide transformation task force to chart a future in which Canada sets the terms, not reacts to them. Every line of the announcement carried the same message. The lumber industry is no longer at the mercy of external power. Canada is taking control of its own economic destiny. For years, pressure from abroad pushed Canada into a defensive posture. Each time another tariff or trade decision landed, the country had to respond after the fact, protecting jobs and stabilizing mills that suddenly faced uncertainty. What Carney delivered this week flips the script. Instead of reacting to shocks, Canada is now shaping the future of its lumber economy. This is more than a policy shift, it is a change in mindset. Canada is treating lumber not as a sector to shield from outside turbulence, but as an asset to build global strength. The railway subsidies alone show a willingness to rethink how products move across provinces, how companies access ports, and how Canada uses its geography to its advantage. A country with some of the world's largest and most sustainable forests is finally building an infrastructure system worthy of that position. Carney's delivery mattered as much as the details. His tone was steady, confident, and unmistakably forward-looking. He was not pleading for cooperation or waiting for signs of goodwill from any foreign capital. Instead, he spoke as the leader of a country charting its own course. Lumber was not framed as a victim of external pressures, but as the foundation of a new phase of Canadian economic independence. For communities across New Brunswick, Quebec, and British Columbia, where mills anchor local economies, this message carries emotional weight. It tells workers that Ottawa sees them not as collateral in a foreign dispute, but as central players in a national project. It tells businesses that the federal government is ready to partner with them as they innovate and grow. And it tells global buyers that Canada intends to remain a reliable, stable supplier of high-quality lumber long into the future. What makes this announcement even more powerful is how seamlessly it fits into Canada's broader economic framework. Carney has repeatedly committed to unlocking up to $1 trillion over the next 5 years to reshape the country's industrial base. The lumber measures announced this week are part of that ambition, not a standalone bailout, but one piece of a national transformation. Investing in forestry means investing in manufacturing, railways, ports, clean energy, indigenous partnerships, and rural development. It strengthens Canada's ability to export beyond its traditional markets and reduces over-reliance on any single partner. It creates the conditions for value-added products, from engineered wood to advanced biomaterials, and it positions Canada to benefit from a world that increasingly values sustainably sourced building materials. Lumber, in this context, becomes more than timber. It becomes a strategic pillar, a catalyst for innovation, an anchor for communities, and a symbol of Canadian resilience. One of the most striking parts of this week's announcement is how confidently Canada is presenting itself to international partners. The country is no longer signaling desperation or frustration with external pressures. Instead, it is showcasing readiness, capability, and stability. With global demand for sustainable lumber growing, Canada is uniquely positioned to take the lead. Its forests are among the most responsibly managed on Earth. Its producers have decades of expertise. And now, its government is aligning funding, logistics, and long-term planning behind them. This shift matters. It means Canada is entering global markets not as a quiet secondary player, but as a country prepared to compete at the highest level, with confidence, not caution. The new measures tell the world that Canada intends to be a dependable, innovative, and highly competitive force in the global lumber economy. Another subtle but important change lies in the domestic response. Provinces that often disagree on economic priorities found common ground on this announcement. Forestry-dependent regions see it as overdue recognition of their economic value. Investors view it as a sign of long-term stability. And national commentators are praising Ottawa for taking a firm stand and offering clarity after years of uncertainty. This unity strengthens Canada's position externally. When a country speaks with one voice, global partners take notice. And in the lumber sector, where reliability and consistency are crucial, Canada now looks more aligned and more predictable than it has in a very long time. Canada's new lumber strategy marks a turning point, not only for the sector but for the country's entire economic identity. It signals a Canada that refuses to live in the shadow of external decisions, a Canada that builds its own pathways to prosperity, and a Canada that understands its strengths, from its forests to its workforce, and is finally leveraging them to full effect. The question now is not whether Canada can protect its lumber industry. The real question is how far this new confidence will carry, and which sector will be next to experience the same transformation.
With the salaries and the benefits, which is long overdue. So thank you for your patience on that. But then scaling up the actual material even more broadly, and it's more than $80 billion over the next 5 years. We're going to focus. This is what we can control. That's kind of the core message. Is yes, we've got to negotiate with the Americans and all that stuff.
Canada's new national budget isn't staying on paper. It's already shaping the real world. During a visit to a medical simulation center in Ottawa, Prime Minister Mark Carney demonstrated exactly how billions in new healthcare funding are transforming frontline training. From bedside ultrasound to high-precision laparoscopic simulators, the visit provided a real-time look at how Canada's healthcare system is beginning to rebuild after years of strain. Throughout the tour, Carney engaged directly with trainees, instructors, and emergency physicians. The footage shows him asking about diagnostic tools, learning how portable ultrasound devices have become essential in emergency care, and testing a laparoscopic simulator used to practice complex procedures safely. He even participated in a blood pressure demonstration as trainees explained how modern devices streamline assessments. The interactions are informal and hands-on, revealing how rapidly medical training is evolving. Physicians describe how skills once limited to specialists are now standard for new graduates, while instructors emphasize how simulation enhances safety by allowing repeated practice. Carney's curiosity and active involvement make the visit more than ceremonial. It becomes a clear illustration of why investment in training and technology matters. The overall tone signals a shift. Canada is confronting healthcare pressure with practical upgrades, not abstract discussions. This facility tour is a deliberate choice. It highlights why the new national budget dedicates massive, sustained resources to healthcare staff, salaries, technology, and education. During conversations with staff, Carney points out that salary improvements and benefit increases were long overdue, reinforcing the message that retaining talent requires long-term financial stability. His emphasis on predictable funding aligns with the government's broader strategy, giving hospitals, training centers, and medical schools confidence to plan further ahead than one funding cycle. For years, Canada's healthcare challenges stemmed from chronic underinvestment in training capacity and outdated equipment. By highlighting frontline tools and real-world skill development, the government signals that the budget is the beginning of a systemic rebuild. Conversations throughout Carney's tour make Canada's broader strategy unmistakably clear. Every interaction points to the same conclusion. The country is modernizing its healthcare workforce by elevating both training standards and technological capability. Physicians emphasize how bedside ultrasound, once confined to specialists, has become a core skill for new emergency doctors. Instructors explain how simulation-based learning dramatically improves safety, allowing students to rehearse high-risk procedures until they reach full confidence. Carney's active participation underscores the government's message that modernizing training is central to the budget. His willingness to try simulators and ask technical questions signals that healthcare renewal cannot wait, and that technology-driven training will define the next generation of Canadian clinicians. Politically, the visit comes at a crucial moment. Canadians are frustrated with long wait times, crowded ERs, and difficulties accessing family doctors, and the government needs to show progress that people can see. By highlighting a training center already benefiting from the budget, Carney presents a narrative of action rather than promises. His direct engagement helps frame the investment as practical and immediate, not distant or theoretical. The visit also reinforces a broader argument that healthcare modernization is tied to national resilience. A capable, well-equipped workforce strengthens productivity and stabilizes essential services. By grounding this message in real-world examples rather than political language, the government positions healthcare rebuilding as a central pillar of Canada's future. What appears to be a simple tour is, in reality, a window into the philosophy behind Canada's most consequential budget in years. Carney isn't just announcing funding, he is showing how that funding transforms training, technology, and the skills pipeline that keeps the system running. Equipment is arriving, training is scaling, and investment has begun. The real test is whether Canada can expand these efforts fast enough to meet nationwide demand. The foundation is finally being rebuilt, and the next steps will determine whether Canada's healthcare system can turn a corner after years of crisis.
Can we expect something in regards to sectoral tariffs?
That was just a brilliant segue there,
tried,
Judy. Very good. We'll see. We're ongoing discussions with the Americans, and I wouldn't overplay it. I'm looking forward to see the president at APEC in Korea.
When Prime Minister Mark Carney confirmed the possibility of a sectoral tariff deal with the United States, it was a signal of strategy, a deliberate shift in how Canada faces the world's most aggressive trade agenda. Instead of chasing a single, sweeping trade agreement, Carney is carving out targeted sectoral arrangements that protect the industries Canada values most. This approach comes at a time when the Trump administration is tightening its grip on foreign imports and warning allies to reshore or pay more. For months, U.S. tariffs have rippled through global markets, reshaping supply chains and straining alliances. But in Ottawa, the effect has been different. Rather than retreat, Canada is adapting, and in doing so, turning Trump's trade war into a chance to rebuild on its own terms.
We have the best best deal with the Americans of any country. We have the lowest tariff on our automobiles and trucks of any country, but we are not satisfied. That is why we are negotiating a new accord on steel, on aluminum, on energy, and on auto.
Behind Carney's confirmation of a sectoral deal lies a deeper strategy, refusing to let Washington dictate the rules. By negotiating within specific industries, steel, aluminum, and energy, Ottawa is taking control over what matters most to its economy. Unlike a broad agreement that binds every sector, a targeted deal gives Canada flexibility. It allows Ottawa to defend core national interests without surrendering leverage to the White House. This is not a return to old-style diplomacy, where Canada waited for the U.S. to set the tone. It is an acknowledgement that the North American relationship has fundamentally changed. Trade researchers point out that such an approach mirrors the reality of 2025, a fragmented global economy where power depends on specialization and resilience. For Canada, steel and aluminum remain vital. Together, these industries employ nearly 100,000 Canadians and anchor regional economies from Hamilton to Saguenay. Carney's move also shields energy exports, a sector worth more than 130 billion Canadian dollars in 2024, according to Statistics Canada, from the volatility of U.S. tariff threats. In other words, sectoral negotiation is not a compromise. It is an insurance policy for Canada's industrial backbone. As Trump's team boasts about reshoring jobs, Canada is quietly writing a new rulebook, one where sovereignty and selectivity go hand in hand.
But the shift goes deeper than trade tactics. It reflects a broader national pivot toward economic independence. In recent weeks, Canadian analysts have urged a new focus on value-added production, making more at home and exporting smarter. That message is taking hold. In the wake of auto layoffs in Ontario, where factories in Brampton and Ingersoll have closed or downsized, the federal government has emphasized rebuilding manufacturing capacity through public-private cooperation. It's not just about saving jobs, it's about reinventing the structure of Canadian industry. Government data shows that the manufacturing sector still accounts for nearly 10% of Canada's GDP, supporting over 1.7 million workers. But global competition and U.S. tariffs have exposed the risks of dependence. Trump's policies, meant to weaken Canada's export position, are instead driving Ottawa to double down on domestic production and long-term resilience. The message from the government is clear. Every tariff that blocks a border crossing will be met with new incentives to produce at home. From clean energy investment to local sourcing requirements, Canada's industrial map is changing. The goal is not isolation, it is stability. Trump's economic wall has unintentionally helped Canada discover its own foundation.
While debates continue in Washington, Carney's eyes are looking east. His upcoming 10-day trip to Asia, confirmed by government sources, aims to strengthen Canada's trade outreach beyond North America. It's a move that even critics admit is well-timed. Asia now represents one of the fastest-growing destinations for Canadian exports, led by markets like Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, and India. According to Global Affairs Canada, bilateral trade with the Indo-Pacific region surpassed 230 billion Canadian dollars in 2024, an increase of more than 15% from the previous year. By engaging Asian partners directly, Carney is pursuing both diversification and influence. The plan aligns with Ottawa's Team Canada trade strategy, which focuses on building alliances with democracies that share interests in sustainable growth, digital infrastructure, and energy transition. For a country long tied to the U.S. market, this shift is monumental. It sends a clear message. Canada will no longer wait for the White House to open the door. It will chart its own course across the Pacific, where demand for food, minerals, and clean energy is growing fast. This Asia strategy is not a reaction to Trump. It's a replacement for dependency. It positions Canada as a middle power with global reach, no longer defined by the policies of its southern neighbor.
Amid all the talk of tariffs and trade, Carney's leadership has kept a human face on economic policy. His government's response to recent job losses in Ontario shows that trade strategy cannot be separated from social responsibility. At the federal and provincial levels, discussions are underway to provide expanded unemployment benefits, mental health programs, and retraining for displaced workers. These measures are not dramatic headlines, but they matter to families affected by the shifting economy. This balance between diplomacy abroad and compassion at home is shaping Carney's image as a pragmatic leader. While Trump rallies crowds with slogans about dominance and victory, Carney speaks through action, reinforcing industries, supporting workers, and steering Canada toward steady growth. In a climate of global volatility, that steadiness resonates. It reminds Canadians that leadership is not about noise, but endurance.
The irony of Trump's trade war is becoming clear. His tariffs were meant to corner allies, yet they are pushing them to adapt faster than ever. For Canada, the pressure has become motivation to modernize, diversify, and strengthen from within. What began as an attempt to make Canada bend is turning into proof of resilience. The concept of a sectoral deal no longer sounds like surrender, but strategy. It reflects a country that refuses to be boxed in by another nation's politics. As global markets adjust to this new reality, one truth stands out. Trump's economic firewalls have failed to contain Canada. Instead, they have sparked a transformation that may outlast his entire trade agenda. While Washington builds barriers, Ottawa is building balance. And in that balance lies the quiet strength of a nation that has learned how to stand tall, even in the shadow of its most powerful neighbor.
I'm pleased to announce that alongside with the President, we are signing the Canada-Indonesia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA. This is our Canada's first ever bilateral trade agreement with an ASEAN country. It's a game-changing agreement. Once it's fully implemented, it means that over 95% of the tariffs on Canada's current exports to Indonesia will be reduced or eliminated.
Canada has just taken a step that signals it will not wait for Washington's response anymore. In late September, Canada and Indonesia signed a comprehensive economic partnership agreement that goes far beyond routine trade. It was not just another diplomatic handshake. It was Canada's first ever free trade agreement with a member of ASEAN, and it happened at the very moment the United States was expanding tariffs under President Donald Trump. The symbolism was striking. While Washington was tightening walls, Ottawa was opening a new door. This was not simply about one agreement. It was about Canada signaling that it is no longer content to rely on the American market alone. The decision reflects a recognition that Trump's tariff-heavy strategy has left allies uncertain and searching for alternatives.
Indonesia and Canada have signed a landmark trade deal. It also marks Canada's first ever trade agreement with an ASEAN member nation.
This is the right deal at the right time with the right partner. This is our largest export market, Canada's largest export market in Southeast Asia. It's an economy that is projected to be one of the world's top 5 economies in a few decades.
The choice of Indonesia was not accidental. With nearly 300 million people and a gross domestic product of around $2 trillion, Indonesia is the largest economy in Southeast Asia. It is already projected by the International Monetary Fund to climb into the world's top 5 economies within a few decades. For Canada, this represents a massive new outlet for goods and services. The government has said that once the agreement is fully in force in 2026, more than 95% of tariffs on Canadian exports will be eliminated or reduced. That means competitive access for agricultural products, fertilizer, wood, financial services, and clean technology.
The deal also includes a partnership between Export Development Canada and the Indonesia Investment Authority, designed to mobilize $800 million in private capital for infrastructure, renewable energy, and advanced manufacturing. It is not just about moving containers across the ocean. It is about positioning Canadian industries inside one of the fastest-growing markets on the planet. By choosing Indonesia, Canada is also connecting to a country that sits at the heart of the Indo-Pacific. Jakarta controls vital shipping lanes and is rapidly industrializing, which means Canadian exporters gain both a market and a strategic foothold. For Canadian businesses, this is a rare chance to combine commercial growth with long-term geopolitical presence. To understand the urgency, we need to look back to Washington. Since early September, the Trump administration has enforced reciprocal tariffs that cover a wide range of imports. Pharmaceuticals face a 100% duty starting October 1st. Heavy trucks, cabinets, and furniture face surcharges between 25% and 50%. The stated goal is to bring jobs back home. Yet the ripple effect has been higher costs for consumers and disrupted supply chains for businesses on both sides of the border. Canada trades an average of 145 million Canadian dollars a day with the United States. For Canadian companies, the new duties mean unpredictability and higher costs. Against that backdrop, the agreement with Indonesia is not just desirable, it is necessary. It locks in tariff-free access, provides a stable investment environment, and even adds a defense cooperation agreement that deepens maritime and cybersecurity collaboration. This is how Canada is insulating itself from the turbulence created in Washington.
The implications for the United States are serious. By standing outside of these new arrangements, America risks losing market share in areas where Canada is now more competitive. Potash from Saskatchewan will meet Indonesia's demand for fertilizer. Canadian grain and wood will land in Jakarta at lower cost. At the same time, Canada is tying itself into Indonesia's critical mineral sector, particularly nickel, which is central to the electric vehicle supply chain. Indonesia also signed a trade deal with the European Union in the same week. That means both Europe and Canada are moving closer to Jakarta while Washington is left on the sidelines. For American workers, the danger is not just about higher import prices at home. It is about missing opportunities abroad. Instead of pulling partners closer, Trump's tariff policy is pushing them away. The Canada-Indonesia agreement is the clearest sign yet that allies are not waiting for Washington. They are building new ties, finding new markets, and in practical terms, they are beginning to move on.
And earlier this week, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a new economic and security agreement with Mexico. And just yesterday, Canada's finance minister held talks in Denmark with European Union officials. Now, all of this comes as Canada looks to diversify its trade portfolio in the face of Trump's tariffs.
When Washington raised tariffs this year, Canada faced a stark choice: stay quiet and accept the pressure, or reach out to new partners. Ottawa chose the second path. Within days, Prime Minister Mark Carney signed a new economic and security agreement with Mexico, and Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne traveled to Europe for high-level talks with the European Union. These steps were not symbolic gestures. They were clear signals that Canada will not stand alone, no matter how much pressure comes from the White House. What was supposed to be a moment of weakness has turned into a moment of action. Trump's tariff strategy was designed to corner Canada, to make the country feel dependent on access to the U.S. market. Instead, it has become the trigger for Canada to strengthen bonds with its continental neighbor and one of the world's largest economic blocs. The choice Ottawa made is now reshaping Canada's trade strategy and shifting the balance of power across North America and beyond.
Trump's reciprocal tariff regime was unveiled this summer as a sweeping attempt to reset global trade. According to the White House proclamations, tariffs on cars and parts rose to 25% in March 2025 under Section 232, and a wider reciprocal framework took effect on September 1. The intention was clear. By raising duties, the administration hoped partners like Canada would concede quickly. Yet the opposite is unfolding. Ottawa is responding not with retreat, but with acceleration. Instead of waiting for relief from Washington, Canada is building a trade firewall of its own. Tariffs that were designed to weaken Canadian industries are forcing Ottawa to search for stability elsewhere. Each new duty on steel or aluminum, each added barrier on canola or copper is acting as a trigger for diversification. Rather than standing isolated, Canada is turning outward, binding itself more closely with neighbors and allies who are eager for dependable partners. This is how a tariff policy meant to dominate has ended up opening doors for Canada abroad. The first door opened in Mexico City. In mid-September, Carney and President Claudia Sheinbaum announced a strategic partnership covering agriculture, infrastructure, energy, and security. For Canadian canola farmers cut off from China's $5 billion market, Mexico's growing biofuel sector now offers a badly needed outlet. For Canada's energy producers, Mexico's infrastructure expansion creates fresh demand. The agreement is short on fanfare but long on significance. It showed that Canada can still shape continental ties without bending to Washington. Only days later, Champagne landed in Europe to pursue the next step. Speaking with EU officials in Denmark, the message was about more than trade volumes. Canada already has CETA, which in its 8 years has lifted services trade by over 70% and goods trade by 65%. The new focus is what experts call CETA Plus. That means moving into strategic cooperation on energy security, critical minerals, defense, artificial intelligence, and digital trade. These are the very sectors where Canada wants to secure future growth. With Europe searching for reliable suppliers of nickel, cobalt, and clean energy inputs, Ottawa is presenting itself as a trusted partner. By expanding ties with both Mexico and the EU, Canada is weaving a network that makes tariffs from Washington less decisive.
The chain of events is striking. Trump applied tariffs to isolate Canada. Instead, Canada responded by strengthening bonds with Mexico in Europe. The U.S. sought leverage. What it created was momentum for Ottawa to diversify. Rather than waiting for concessions, Canada is building its own strategy. The numbers tell the story. Trade with the EU has already expanded by double digits under CETA. The new partnership with Mexico targets agriculture and energy worth billions. And consultations at home are preparing Canada for the formal review of the North American Trading Pact next year. The lesson is that tariffs do not always weaken their target. In this case, they have produced resilience. Canada is not retreating, but repositioning. Trump's policy was meant to break Canada's unity, yet it has instead accelerated Canada's outreach and strengthened its global standing. What was supposed to be a trap has become a turning point. Canada is showing that it can withstand pressure, forge new ties, and emerge more secure than before.